Welcome back to this podcast episode entitled The Future of Healthcare, where we're taking a complex systems view on how thinking sustainably is shaping the future of healthcare as a whole, and the role that our industry has to play in informing and promoting this way of thinking. We re-enter the discussion with Marlene Knupfer making an admission about her own experiences in just one area of healthcare, routine diagnostic testing, and how it offers significant opportunities for streamlining healthcare.
Talking about all of these diagnostics, it strikes me that there's a difference between what we're trying to do in the industry and trying to have a shift in mindset, but there's also the individual, right? And I'm thinking about the hypocrisy even within myself. If I go to the doctor and they say, I'm 80% sure, 90% sure, you're fine, your headaches, you don't have to worry about them, but we could do an MRI just to be sure. I'm going to say I want to be sure. And I know that there's lots of carbon footprint that is associated with that. And I also know that doctors have this tendency, especially if you've got private medical insurance, to say, let's just be extra sure. Let's just do these extra tests. And I know Germany is a huge problem in this regard because they get lots of money if they do these diagnostics. So I'm wondering about these two sides, the one where, the individual is going to want to preserve their own life no matter what, and they want to be extra sure. Does it make sense to talk about that, or is it mudding the waters?
I think what you're raising here, Marlene, is really important because it's speaking to how we actually engage with patients on this topic. And this is not an easy topic. I think if we look to the respiratory therapy area as an example, carbon footprinting of inhalers has been an issue for quite some time now and is often used as a driver for switching patients from one inhaler device to another. That's done often and sometimes in a way which is arguably less patient-centric and more driven on the basis of carbon and cost, which is something we want to avoid, because what that can do is it can place a burden of responsibility, a sense of guilt, so-called green guilt, on the patients themselves, so that they can feel almost like as they're treating themselves for their asthma, they're causing some kind of planetary harm that's detrimental. And that's an impossible situation to be in. And we want to avoid patients feeling like they're in that impossible situation. I think this is why it's so important for every single stakeholder to be involved in this process of transformation. Everyone has a role to play. Patients have a role to play, but they have a role to play alongside every other stakeholder that exists within the healthcare system itself. And we all need to understand what our unique contributions are and live that identity out in the way that we engage, in the way that we interact, in the way that we lead, in the actions that we take. That's not so easy, and it takes time and it takes a lot of patience. So I think at this point, the best thing we can be doing is having conversations like this and many others where we're bringing diverse stakeholder groups together, sometimes for the first time, to debate and discuss some of these tensions and polarities that you've pulled out there, because there isn't an easy answer, but ultimately there will be an answer and we have to work together in order to find it. So that would be my answer to your question, and I think it was a really good one. So thank you for asking.
Thanks, Emma.
Thank you, and indeed, Emma, let's carry on, if we may, asking you a question. But I've heard you talk about carbon tunnel vision as a phrase that you've used. I wonder whether you could expand that here. It feels like that's a natural lead from where we've been.
Yeah, I think that's where we get so focused on reducing carbon and this goal towards net zero that we lose sight of maybe some of the other downstream consequences of the actions that we're taking. And for me, that's why it's so important we take what I call a systemic approach. So really trying to understand what the consequences are of the actions that we're taking. A good example of this is, well, I think is a good example, and maybe it's up for debate, is the shift towards electric cars. Now, whilst that may reduce carbon emissions, it still uses up significant amounts of natural resources. So far better would be that we actually don't need a car in the first place, or that we reduce the number of cars that we have in our household. So sometimes the simplest answers are the right ones, and we just shouldn't lose sight of those simpler things which maybe require a bit more of a behavior shift and a lifestyle change, as opposed to shiny new technology and new innovation. So I think that's what I would raise in response to your question is, yes, we do need to reduce carbon emissions, but we shouldn't be doing that at the expense of other negative impacts, either on patient or planetary health elsewhere.
So it comes back to that systems thinking that we spoke about. Jason, I see you're itching to contribute there.
Yeah, I think this is one that we're looking at from the Digital Health and the Circular Economy project, because the European Union's made it a strategic priority to digitalize medicine. And they talk about all the value this will bring. It'll reduce healthcare costs, it'll remove barriers to access. But then when we challenged them and said, well, what about the associated waste? It was just never considered. And so that was sort of what started the EU-funded project, was to bring that holistic approach to it. But unfortunately, the momentum for a lot of these devices has been towards single use. And so you design these devices, you pack them with electronics, with a printed circuit board that's designed to last for 10 years, yet the device might be used for a matter of hours or days before it's discarded. And so there's also this need to shift that momentum back from single use towards designing these devices for reuse, refurbishment, remanufacture, of reusing the components in a new device if that's not possible. But that's a challenge, because again, it goes back to Emma's comment about the patient preferences as well. People have this perception the brand new device is the best. If you say, well, you're going to get this used device, there's this perception it's somehow inferior, even though it's been tested and validated and proved to work just as well as the new device. I think one of the things we've seen, though, is in the US, a circular economy has evolved because there's more of a gray zone around it, around regulations. And you see companies out there that have grown into very large reprocessors, but they're able to collect things like ECG lead sets, digital oximeters. A lot of these digital devices are used in healthcare. They're able to reprocess them. And in many cases, they can sell these products back for less than half the cost of a new device. And so you see a lot of hospitals in the US have now taken hold of this, and they see it as, hey, this is reducing our operating costs. We're happy to use refurbished devices, and patients aren't even given an option. It's just, this is part of your healthcare now. This is what you're getting. So it's almost sidetracked that patient piece a little bit. In Europe, it hasn't evolved yet, I think, mainly because the fragmented regulatory approach. While the EU medical device regulations define circularity, they've left it into individual nation states to operationalize it. And so you've seen countries like France that have said, no, we're not going to allow reprocessing. Well, that's a major market that's now off the table. Netherlands and Germany are allowing reprocessing, but in the Netherlands, you see a much more stringent administrative requirement compared to Germany. So then it's very difficult. If you're a reprocessor, you want to have one process in the economies of scale, but then you're gearing your entire process towards the most stringent regulations and wasting resources in less stringent countries. So it's become a challenge and a friction to developing that circular business model for the European Union.
Thanks, Jason. And that kind of leads us on actually to, if there's one thing we could all do tomorrow, what would that be and why? And given where that conversation's going today, I think we could get some quite diverse views here.
Well, happy to go first. If there's one thing I could do tomorrow, I would convene all of the chief medical and chief scientific officers from the major life science companies all around the world for a good conversation around what medical leadership looks like in the sustainable healthcare transition.
I also would agree with that. I think it's a really good idea. And I guess just to sort of almost build on that, or maybe go back to basic principles, is that I think as humans, we are individually quite vulnerable. But I think, it's really been collaboration that's enabled us to get to where we are today and evolve and achieve all the things we have. But it's going to be collaboration as well that's going to enable us to create a sustainable future. So we all need to work together. We can't do this alone. So it's going to need, everyone within the sector to pull their weight.
Very good.
Yeah, and I echo their responses, but I think thinking that the average listener here is probably maybe not in a position, maybe not driving things in sustainability. If you're to just look at individual actions, I would say just take care of your health, because preventative medicine is the cheapest alternative. That's the best thing an individual can do.
Right. I think going along with Jason's strategy, thinking about people maybe not being in a position to do much. I think it's good to think about your own personal life and just think about what you can do. And to the point that Emma was making earlier, sustainability has become a hot topic and it's sexy to be sustainable, which is good in one way. But on the other hand, it does make us want to have the newest piece of kit, or you want to have that electric car, or you want to have. And really, sometimes the most sustainable thing you can do is just use what you have until it doesn't work any longer, instead of getting the newest thing. So I would encourage people to think about that. You don't need that new laptop. If yours is working, just leave it. You can do your work the way you have it. And the same goes for your phone and your, I don't know, your earphones and your every piece of kit that you have.
Thank you. So, and a final question, and this is truly a bit of fun. I'm curious as to whether or not any of you have any broadcastable anecdotes from your journey here. So things that you've found surprising or shocking, even in terms of the things that you've come across. Ashton?
I mean, I don't know about shocking. As I sort of mentioned this earlier, these case studies. I mean, the reason I got interested in this area in the first place was seeing these case studies that are demonstrating how just a small change in a patient pathway can actually have a significant impact on achieving net zero targets in the NHS. And I really had never considered that before. So it's a mindset shift, and I'm trying to do what I can to kind of spread the word about that and make people aware of it. But yeah, it's not some sort of profound comment there, but yeah, I just think being aware of how we can innovate pathways and how that can achieve both improved outcomes for patients as well as a greener future.
Thank you, Jason. Anything from the road that you've trod?
I think the Pareto effect plays out. Like typically what you'll see is 80% or more of emissions are driven by 20% of the activities. It's just finding what's that 20% of activities that are driving things.
Yep. Emma?
I would say the thing that continues to surprise me is that we still see environmental issues as separate from human health issues. Mm-hmm. And it's been quite a long journey for myself personally, to help those around me to see those interconnectivities and to understand that our livelihoods and our ability to thrive as humanity depends upon us having a healthy planet to live on. And that's still not a message that it's widely appreciated and widely understood.
Indeed. Marlene, anything that you've observed?
I think just from the fact that the road I've trodden is definitely shorter than the ones from any of the panelists that we've got here. I think it's something more basic where I found it very overwhelming when I got into this space, because I felt like, there's so much that you need to deal with and there's so much information and you don't really know which way to turn and you feel like you're missing the boat and it's too late already. And one of the best experiences was somebody within this space turning around and saying, no, you're not too late. You are here now, and that's all that it takes. So just, don't be discouraged. And if you're interested, and if this is something close to your heart, then get involved now. It's not too late. And I think it's also a good message to anybody listening. You can get involved. Don't let that be an excuse that other people are covering it, because I think we need everybody.
And I, for one, and Emma, this will please you, no doubt. I, for one, will embrace paying the ULEZ charge if and when I decide I really, really need to drive into central London. I'll use the train, I promise, Emma, as much as I can. And I take your point, right? You as your work in respiratory disease, the link is obvious. And we made that link socially with something like smoking tobacco. That was a very clear social change link that happens there. We've done it with alcohol and driving. I wonder if there are models there that we can leverage for how we change societal perceptions over our healthcare and how we take responsibility.
Absolutely, John. It has been done and it can be done again. So I'm extremely hopeful for what the future holds.
Excellent. And you'll note, everybody, we didn't once mention planting trees or all these kind of other cliches around sustainability and carbon. this whole series has been around us trying to demonstrate that sustainability as a lens in the work that we do, both in clinical trials and indeed a broader healthcare setting, is critical for how we integrate that thinking and benefit from that thinking. So I want to take a special moment to say thank you to all of you for your contributions. Marlene, thank you very much for your work in the background, getting us all organized. Ashton, Jason, Emma, really appreciate you taking the time and joining in on our podcast with this, and no doubt a lot more yet to come. Look forward to working with you as we go forward.
During the podcast, Jason Laroche from J&J made a statement that the way the Pareto effect plays out, typically what you'll see is 80% or more of emissions are driven by 20% of the activities. This is in reference to the Pareto principle, which is also sometimes known as the 80-20 rule, and states that roughly 80% of consequences come from 20% of causes.
Thank you for listening to this podcast, and indeed this series. For now at least, we're concluding our focus on sustainability in clinical trials, although I suspect that we will be returning to this impactful topic. If you have not already done so, please sign up for future episodes of the Fortrea podcast, where we will continue to discuss the work that we do together with sponsors and sites to bring new healthcare innovations to patients around the world.